Welcome to the weekend. I'm Jon Caldara, your devil's advocate. And also, by the way, I run a little organization called the Independence Institute. Check us out at independenceinstitute.org. Later on in the program, Amy Oliver will join me to talk about transparency in government. But right now, a little change in Colorado legislature. Mark Waller, state representative, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
You represent Colorado Springs area, and you've been in, now you're starting your second term. But you've already made it to the assistant majority leader, so not bad for 2 years' work.
Well, you know, I guess term limits, maybe they have their advantage for guys like me, that's for sure.
Let's talk a little bit about the change. Now, it's been, what, 4 years since we've had a Republican House? Longer?
It's actually been 6 years since we've had a Republican House, which means, based on term limits, there's not one Democrat in the State House that was in the minority prior to now, and not one Republican was in the majority prior to now. So it's a completely different role for all of us.
So everybody's learning as they're going. What's going to be different? Now you've got a slight one-vote majority. Now let's just lay this out for people who are not following at home, don't have the scorecard. Of course, for a bill to become a law, you got the House that has to vote for it, the Senate that has to vote for the exact same law, and of course the governor needs to sign it. Well, the Senate is still firmly a Democratic House, and the governor is still firmly a Democrat, just like Ritter was. But Hickenlooper, I think, might be a bit more business-friendly. We hope, Hick.
I'm hopeful that way, too.
I'm hopeful that way, too. But you've only got a one-vote advantage for Republicans. This was supposed to be a year where we could win back the House with several to spare. That really didn't happen. We got one more than the Democrats had, which allowed Frank McNulty to become the Speaker, Amy Stevens to be the Majority Leader, and you to be the Assistant Majority Leader. That doesn't make me feel really comfortable, one single vote. Now, Republicans are great when it comes to being in the minority. They're not so good when it comes to being in the majority.
Well, John, I'll tell you, it should make you happy for this reason. The difference between 32 and 33, which, 32, you're in the minority, 33, you're in the majority. The difference between 32 and 33 in the State House is huge because the majority party gets to elect the Speaker of the House, and the Speaker of the House largely dictates the tone for the House during the legislative session. For example, the Speaker decides where all of the bills are going to go during, to which committee they're going to go to during the session, and also
a friendly committee or an unfriendly committee. So in other words, Frank McNulty will decide whether life or death for a lot of different bills.
Absolutely, and those committees also now favor Republicans. There's a one-member advantage on each committee for Republicans in the State House. That's huge moving forward. It seems like there's not a whole lot of difference between 32 and 33, but the difference is almost immeasurable. I mean, last year, we just got the chance to have a voice. This year, we get to have the say in actual governance.
All right, you mentioned that there's a lot of new Republicans, a lot of new Democrats. I haven't always been happy with the Republicans when they've been in power. We've had, and the same thing happened in Washington. Here in Colorado, we had the Senate, we had the House, we had a Republican governor, and you know what? We really didn't make any sort of substantial change. We did some good things, and I'm glad we put in a school report card system. I'm glad we trimmed around the edges, but we didn't put in, we didn't do the massive changes. We didn't do personnel reform or privatization or priority-based budgeting or right to work, any of these things. Federal government, it was even worse. We started spending more than Democrats did. It was an embarrassment. Now, Republicans have one House. This is good for us, but what are the downfalls first? Let's talk about the downsides. Doesn't this make it so that all we need to do is lose one single vote and the Democrats have everything? You got to keep your party together.
I think that's going to be a challenge this session. In fact, that's one of the challenges I'm tasked with, and that's making sure we're all playing on the same sheet of music. But keep in mind, last year, the other side, the Democrats, had an 11-member advantage on us, and there were many circumstances where we were able to reach out to the other side and talk to members of that caucus and get them to vote with us on particular issues. I'm hopeful that we're going to be able to do that this session as well. There are, believe it or not, some pro-business Democrats out there, and I'm confident if we pitch the right message, we'll be able to bring some of them along as well.
Having a slight majority for Republicans in the House actually helps Hickenlooper as well. And that some of the crazy leftist ideas, we're all going to have to wear hemp-made underwear or something, isn't going to make it to his desk, so he doesn't have to worry about vetoing it or not. You nasty Republicans are going to stop a lot of those bills from happening. Aren't you doing him a favor, making sure that he doesn't have to make a lot of the hard calls?
Absolutely, and I'll tell you, as a minimum, we do get to be a backstop now. And if we do nothing else this legislative session, I'll be happy about that. But I think you're right, and it's kind of a nuanced point in that we give Hickenlooper the opportunity to move more towards the middle, which is exactly where he needs to govern from, especially with a $1 billion budget shortfall coming up. We're going to, for the first time in the history of the state of Colorado, make no kidding significant and deep cuts to the budget. It's not going to be these one-time fix actions, not shell game moving money around or anything like that. It's going to be actual cuts to the budget.
I mean, for people who don't follow this at home, because it is boring stuff, which means it's highly, highly important. In the past, we've used all these great budget tricks. We've been able to move a payday from this year to the next year, and that saved us enough money.
Use our dollars.
Yeah, we used all sorts of things. We said that this building isn't really owned from us. We're going to lease it back. We're going to do all sorts of tricks. That's not going to work any longer. We've got a $1 billion shortfall. That's about, 12% of the general fund. This is a big hunk of money you're going to have to deal with. And a lot of people think, well, that means service cuts. We're going to have to cut. Let's do the other side first. Will there be any more tax increases? Under Ritter, this legislature found that they had a newfound power. The Supreme Court said, you can call pretty much anything you want a fee. You don't have to go to the people under Tabor and ask them for it. So we'll put a fee increase on, mill levy fee increase on your homes. We're going to put a new fee increase on your car registration taxes. Oh, sorry, not taxes, fees. You buy paper bags, paper plates, sugar, soda. We're going to increase the fees. We're going to take away all these tax breaks. And you guys were empowered to do so by the Supreme Court, which I think is just an abomination. Are we going to see any more of that hijinks?
I don't think so. I think if the voters said one thing during this last election cycle, they couldn't have said this better, and that was, we don't want to be taxed anymore. And by the way, we think fees are taxes. We do not want that. And I think that certainly resonated with my caucus, with the House Republicans, and I think that's a mistake we made 6 years ago. We moved away from those fiscal conservative principles. But I'm here to tell you, we recognize the error of those ways, and there isn't going to be a fee increase or a tax increase that comes out of the legislature this year with Republican support.
Really? So, and you can't do it without Republicans. But remember, it only takes one of you guys to fall off the wagon, and this thing could happen. So you're telling me no more fees?
Yeah, I feel very confident in telling you that revenue will not be generated for the state budget by increase in fees.
Or taxes.
Or taxes.
All right.
I mean, obviously the tax increase has to go to a vote of the people, but I don't even see a referred measure coming out of the legislature this year to push a tax increase.
Then let's push it one side. You got a $1 billion shortfall here, my friend, and if you're not going to raise the revenue coming in, you're going to have to do something on the other side. And I don't think that has to be just cutting programs or spending. It means you're going to have to make some tough decisions. We put together our citizens budget, which I hope all you will use as a tool, saying here's a roadmap of what you can do and what things need to be changed. What's likely on the block?
I think, first of all, I think there are some particular challenges for us. And that's that 65% or so of our budget is actually either federally or constitutionally mandated. So those are dollars that we don't get to exercise control over. So for example, K through 12 education, constitutionally mandated through Amendment 23, that's 43% of the budget right there. We only have a very few areas that we can cut from. Now, and certainly we need to make major cuts, but I'm also hopeful that if we promote private sector jobs in the state of Colorado, we'll get people back to work. And when people get back to work, they pay income taxes, they pay sales and use taxes, and that brings revenue up. And that's how we should be focusing on the revenue aspect of this.
But that's going to take longer than getting this done by this May. You've got to have a budget in place, given the revenue numbers you have now, which means you're gonna have to make some tough calls. And that means you're going to have to piss off some constituency groups. I don't want to be in your shoes. It's one thing when the money's flowing through, and after a referendum C, you were able to spend every dime that came in.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you've done that. You can't spend any more, so you're going to have to cut. Is that going to be in higher education? Are you going to look at things like sentencing reform? What's likely to happen? Give us a prediction.
Sure. Well, I think we're going to have to make cuts across the board to the ability that the Constitution allows us to make cuts. They're going to have to be across the board. I think certainly higher education understands that it's ripe for cutting, because that's one of the few areas where there's a lot of money that we can actually exercise control over the budget. In fact, this year I'm running a bill for the Department of Higher Education to give them more flexibility, to give our state universities more flexibility in how they spend their money, because they understand that they're going to have to operate at an efficiency that they haven't seen before. And as far as sentence reform goes, this is an area that is particularly close to my heart. I ran a sentence reform bill last year that is going to exercise over the next 5 years $55 million in savings to the people of the state of Colorado. And the majority of that savings, almost all of that savings, comes from fewer prison beds. Well, the only way that we truly
You're going to have prisoners sleep together? Is that the whole
we have fewer prisoners, John. And so when you have fewer prisoners, you need fewer prison beds.
In other words, what you're doing is taking non-violent prisoners
Absolutely.
and finding an alternative method to punish them. That might be supervised parole, it might be ankle bracelets, it might be community service, but there are other ways to do this.
That's right.
But this has been difficult for the right to get on board. That a lot of hardcore, let's get tough on crime guys haven't always liked this idea.
Well, I think that we're starting to understand that we just can't pass arbitrary sentence laws to look like we're tougher on crime. We actually have to be smarter on crime. But there's another step to this savings process, and that's after you reduce recidivism and you have fewer guys end up in prison, you have to get rid of the prison bed. That's the only way you're going to be successful. That's the only way you're going to truly exercise a savings.
Well, we've got about a minute or so left, but so talk to me about some of the structural issues. Particularly, I want to know about PARA, our pension fund for government employees. It's bloated, it's underfunded, and unlike when a private sector pension plan goes bust, we the taxpayers are going to be on the hook for this one. It could bankrupt the state in the future. Is now the time to fix it, and will you?
I think now is the time to fix it, and I think one of the ways to fix it is to decrease this ever-expanding group of people that ends up in PARA. And prison reform is one of these areas where we need to cut some of those unionized state jobs because we don't need them anymore. And we need to reduce the number of people in state government, which then reduces the number of people in this pay-as-you-go PARA system.
All right, real quick. New governor going to be somebody Republicans can work with?
You know, so far he's saying all the right things. I graded his speech, his State of the State speech. I gave him an A. I closed my eyes and I saw a Republican. I was incredibly excited.
We'll see if it's just words or actions. Hey, thank you so much, Representative. Stay tuned. We're going to be talking about transparency.